player, you can hear the Italiano sound. Hey, Giuseppe, what do you say? Mamma mia! Buongiorno from Monteregione, Italy, where I have come to an absolutely stunning courtyard in a medieval fort to pick up the new GTC4 Lusso T with Shmi 150. There have been worse ways to start a Monday. Without further ado, let's hop in this beautiful car, see what it's all about. The first thing for me, and I can't imagine what it's like for both of you guys spending time around the FF, is upon starting it up and even, you know, the first depression of throttle, hearing what sounds like a California
It does sound very California T.
Last night in the presentation, they were, you know, telling us all the stats and figures and torque curves and things like that. And one of the things that I did pick up on was how they were pitching this as having more lower down response than the V12, and I can confirm this thing is nippy down low. And it's agile too. The handling of this is fabulous. It is, you know, it flows. You would never think you were in a car this size. And also, I'm not sure if it's the four-wheel steer that's helping disguise its mass too, but it feels light. It feels quite a light car. You know, I'm comparing it with the F12. You're not sat as far back either. So even though this is a front engine car, every time I get in the F12, I look down that bonnet and think you could land an aeroplane on that thing. It's so ridiculous. But this, it doesn't feel like that. I feel more on the nose. Yeah. And when we lifted the bonnet up earlier, it's amazing how far back they've pushed that engine. It really is a sort of mid-front mounted.
But the other thing, it's still got things like carbon ceramics. It's still got like it's loaded up like a Ferrari sports car should be.
The sound is a really interesting one because obviously Tim and I have been in the FF a lot recently, and
for you it must be weird.
You get used to the V12 sound, and this feels very much like an FF still, but with a completely different soundtrack. It's almost an uncanny
Which is so odd, right? It's so strange.
Because it's completely different, the noise, you know. Twin turbocharged V8, significantly more muted than an naturally aspirated V12.
Yes.
Like the NA V12, when you get up towards the top end of the rev range, is just screaming.
Sublime, isn't it?
But to use a V12, you have to be almost, I mean, their words, Ferrari's words, an automotive connoisseur, because you need to be getting the most out of it, driving up towards the top of the rev range, and playing with the driving style, whereas this is much more a case of you can jump in it and just drive it.
Which is interesting, because they're pitching this as the driver's version. They're pitching this as the person that wants a more sporty experience. It's a funny one, isn't it? Which brings me back around to, are they doing a very good job of disguising the fact they need to launch this, rather than the benefits of a V8R, it's lighter and...
That is a very interesting point. There's another one. Another thing is the price point in the UK, for example.
Yes.
This car is £36,000 cheaper than the V12.
Now that sounds a huge amount, and it is, but in the realms of Ferrari buyers and the way that they spec these cars,
if you're putting 60 grand of options on a car, do you really care?
Literally, I mean, you know, that sounds stupid, but that is before options. So by the time you've spec'd one of these up, you're not too far away from a V12. Now I know you've got to then put spec on top of the V12.
They did make the point that the base spec on this is identical to the V12, and the options are all exactly the same. So whatever you would have spent on the V12, you spend on the V8 as well.
So that's why I'm thinking this is probably more of a market-specific car rather than a...
I can see that.
Than a sort of purist-specific car. Speaking of purists, we've got to get this Panda out of the way. So as we're taking our time on this slow bit of the journey through this rather tranquil town, I'm going to take the time to show you a little bit about the new passenger side display. Now in the F12, it was only a display to pretty much scare the passenger as to how fast you were going. You couldn't really interact with it so much. But on this one, the passenger can actually control stuff. So if a driver doesn't want to take his eyes off the road and change the soundtrack or play with the sat-nav, passenger's able to interact with it right here. Swipe, turn list, all sorts of things. Not that, as Tim mentioned quite rightly earlier, not that the main screen is too far away for you to interact with, but they've gone and put 2 touchscreens here. But the main thing is that the passenger side display is actually interactive and works rather than just passive. Also, when Tim adjusts the Manettino, like so, you can see it change on the passenger side in real time. Anyway, we just arrived to our lunch stop, and I think Tim's gonna go off and you're gonna do some more filming, and I'm gonna indulge on some fine Italian chow.
This is where it comes round to the biggest difference is the territory you're in terms of the tax bracket, that the emissions bracket that the V12 versus the V8 falls into.
Yeah,
could be a complete game changer. Yeah, they're both top whack. So at least for the UK it doesn't make any sense. For China, it could double the price of your car.
Yeah. Then you have to think about it.
Which China is one of the fastest growing markets for supercars, and I reckon that's probably the biggest incentive for this model.
Yeah.
I wonder if they'll maintain the V12s naturally aspirated, or if they'll go, I mean, will we see a hybrid in the likes of your daily like this, or the next F12? What I wouldn't want is a V8 turbo F12. No. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's.
Don't you think will there be an superclass for the V8?
Hope not. Unless it, and if they do, that solidifies what we're talking about here. It's totally for a different market.
Yeah.
It would be the 708.
Yeah.
700 horsepower V8.
Yeah. 708. Super fast.
Yeah.
Super
fairly fast.
708.
Me embracing the Giuseppe mood when in Italy. Hey, the most flamboyant gear shift in the land. So there's one thing, well in fact there's several things that Ferrari do very well, and both of these things are immediately apparent upon planting your right foot. Now the gear shifts in these are fabulous. So back home my, I guess, daily driver is an RS6, and for all of its wondrous characters and daily usability, I'm still crying out for a gearbox that is as good as this in a daily application. These boxes are typically reserved for a sportier driving environment and driving feel, and God, when you use it, it is absolutely rapid, and it does really slam those gears home. Now unfortunately for me, it isn't mated to an engine which is exotic enough to really get my heart throbbing, or as my F12 would do, literally get goosebumps on your neck. But that's probably not the end of the world, because that ultimately isn't what this car is about. It is a more daily, practical car. But where it makes up for that, and in terms of the usability of it on a day-to-day basis, and particularly around slower environments like towns or, you know, slower, tight and twisty country roads, is the amount of low-down torque it's got. Now, this is third gear, 3,000 RPM. There's a surge of it. There's a surge of torque, and you know, for all of its 610 horsepower and for everything that I missed in a sort of higher revving, naturally aspirated engine, in real world, day-to-day usability, which this car is for, you're going to be more thankful for that low-end torque, for sure. I mean, just coming out of that roundabout, you can fly out effortlessly. The other thing is just how dynamic it is as a result of the four-wheel steer. It just basically gives you a lot more confidence upon turning and just tighter, twisty turns. Now, in this particular car, when you mate that transmission with that torque and the four-wheel steer, what you're getting is a driving experience that doesn't look like, quite frankly, it should come from a car of this size. Let's check this out. Let's do the shift. Look how fast that is. Absolutely instant. And, you know, that's because ultimately, while this is a practical car, it's developed by a company that in its very core is all about a sportier drive. It has to have that inherent sports car DNA. Okay, it's probably not as practical as it could be. Space in the back, it's more of a 2+2. It is a four-seater, and you can easily fit 4 people in, but I don't think you'd want to do a really long journey in the back there. It's more for taking your friends and family to the pub. Okay, it does have a lot more practicality than take my F12, and I think as a daily proposition, it's very, very nice. However, me personally, I'd still opt for the V12, and this comes down to one word. Let's go for 2 words: soul and emotion. I'm not taking anything away from this engine, it's fantastic, but when I'm buying a Ferrari, I want it to just be so visceral and full of energy that when I plant that foot, you almost brace yourself for the sensory impact. And this engine really isn't doing it for me. As Ben said earlier, it's like the neighbours playing your favourite soundtrack next door. You can hear it, but you're not quite getting the full effect. And I think that for all of this thing's merit, I can't help but think that it was developed for market demands rather than customer demands. And what I mean by that is, it's not that the market is necessarily crying out for a thumping V8, it's that due to emissions that we're gonna unfortunately have to downsize and make something which is more available to markets where taxes will just, well, quite frankly, hit you in the ass. Anyway guys, that was a brief overview of my first experience in any GTC4. It just so happens that I've driven the V8 first. Hopefully I'll get to drive the V12 soon, and yeah, I'll be there to take you along that journey. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time. Ciao!